This is the story of a wild adventure. It's very common to go camping in New Zealand, to go on a road trip. We pack up a small tent, a couple of friends, a bit of food, and off we go to explore. So this time it was almost Christmas time, and we set off with my husband Graham and his large friend Mike, who has featured in several of my other stories. And we were going to go to an area called East Cape. Now, the North Island of New Zealand kind of resembles a stingray with sort of two areas that kind of stick out, and one of these is East Cape. And East Cape is very remote. It's a very windy drive there. It's also very beautiful. It's the exact opposite to the city experience. You are no longer in the rat race. It is quiet, it is calm, there are beautiful beaches, everybody does everything at a slow pace, and there's children on horseback with no saddles. It's a completely different experience than city life. So we thought we'd go and explore this place because we'd heard that it was so wonderful. So off we went. It takes about 3 to 4 hours to get to the last small town on the road before you're heading into the great unknown. So we waved goodbye to the last small town, and we were driving through these bays, and it was getting really windy, and we were looking out to sea, and we could see the volcanic island of White Island. And then as we kept going, the rain started coming and the drizzle came in, and we couldn't see White Island any longer. And it was about at that point that we thought, actually, you know what? We didn't check the weather forecast before we left. We should really turn on the radio and see whether what's happening with the weather forecast. This was before we had cell phones, and even if there were cell phones, there is very little coverage around this area. So we turned on the radio, and we got a really big surprise. So Cyclone Fergus is 120 kilometres off the coast of New Zealand. It is going to bring 30 hours of torrential rain and 8 hours of gale-forced winds. We recommend that all campers and trampers in the area pack up and leave immediately. Oh crap. We went, what do we do now? We had been travelling all day, and we passed the last big camping ground 2 hours ago, and we thought, what now? So we started to look for another place to camp. We came to the last campground on the road before the East Cape, and we went in there, and they said to us, no, we're not taking any more people. And we're like, what do you mean you're not taking any more people? They said, didn't you hear? The government said to leave. And we thought, well, we're kind of not in a position to go all the way back to Hamilton. We can't get to Gisborne before nightfall, and we're kind of stuck. And you're saying that you won't take us? They said, we can't. The regulations say we can't take you. And we went, oh, what are we going to do now? So we kept on driving, and we started looking for some flat ground to pitch our tent. There wasn't very much flat ground anywhere. Finally, we found a place, and so there's a main road. Main road is a very relative term. It wasn't really a main road. And then there's another road that goes off to the East Cape Lighthouse. That's how far out we were and how remote we were. And on that road, we found the place to stay. So it was an opening to a farm gate. So there was a patch of grass right beside a farm gate. It was long grass, and unfortunately, it was covered with cow poo. But it was pouring with rain now. The rain was kind of coming at this kind of angle. It was blowing very strongly, and we didn't have any options left. the men got out of the car to start pitching the tent in the rather strong wind and rain, and it was very, very difficult, as you can imagine, to try and put the pegs in the ground. The ground was already very, very sodden with water. And so they got a couple of pegs in, and then they shoved me in the tent to hold the tent down from the inside. And so here am I inside the tent, and the tent's going slap, slap, slap on my face. It is not a pleasant experience being slapped in the face by a wet tent constantly. Finally, they got the guy ropes out, and they had all the guy ropes pegged to the strongest wind. And then in came Graham with the sleeping bags, and then finally Mike came into the tent. Now, I've decided that a 4-man tent isn't really a 4-man tent. Maybe it would be if you were talking about 4 small men, but I wasn't with small men. So between Mike, who I think I said was around about 195 centimetres tall, my husband, who's over 190 centimetres, and me, who's 174 centimetres tall, we're not exactly small people. And so the 4-man tent was particularly cramped, and Mike doesn't even fit from end to end, so he has to kind of curve around to lie down. So it was a bad night. I mean, there's no other way to say it. Between the wind, the rain, the tent about to collapse and rip, cramped in there with these guys, it's damp, it's hot, it's stinky. Ugh, it was not pleasant. We managed to survive the night. We might have got some sleep, I don't really remember. But when we woke up the next morning, it was the weather was a little bit more calm. We bundled up the very wet tent into the car, and we drove flat out for Gisborne. So what had happened overnight was that Cyclone Fergus hadn't actually yet made landfall. There was a small low pressure system before Cyclone Fergus that had brought all the wind and rain. So Cyclone Fergus was still to come, and we did not want to be tenting in Cyclone Fergus if that was how bad it was before Cyclone Fergus. So we spent all day racing for Gisborne, and we didn't stop anywhere, we didn't enjoy anything, we were just trying to get to that city. And we got to Gisborne probably around about 5 o'clock in the evening, and we got to the first accommodation provider that we could, and we said, we need some beds, please give us some beds for the night. And they said, we've got nothing, Gisborne's full. All the campers and all the trampers have come to Gisborne to escape the cyclone. I'm going to ring around all the other accommodation providers for you. So this man did. He rang all the other accommodation providers for us and finally found us literally the last 3 beds in Gisborne. So we had somewhere to go. We were very, very grateful to have those beds, I can tell you that. And to enjoy our evening, instead we went to the cinemas. We went to the movies, and we watched a movie that had just come out of America called Twister. So that shows you how long ago this was. And so really interesting experience watching a tornado movie in the middle of a cyclone. So that night the cyclone hit, and the next morning tents were ripped apart, there was flooding, there were slips everywhere, and we were safe and protected, and we didn't get hurt at all. And we made our way back to Hamilton, and all we came away with was just a good story to tell.